My name is Hannah Smith, and today I'm going to be discussing sound in film and how it better allows filmmakers to tell their stories. Before we get started though, I'd like to cover some key vocabulary that might make the next couple minutes make a little bit more sense. First off, I want to address diegetic and non-diegetic sound. Diegetic sound is best explained as any natural sound that would occur in the world of the scene. Anything from people conversing to the sound of a car door slamming, everything that we are seeing and living within the real life of the scene. External diegetic sound is similar to diegetic, and it basically covers any sounds that are naturally within the scene, but they're not necessarily seen in the frame. So, for example, in the film Jurassic Park, we often will hear sounds of dinosaurs in the distance, or of cars moving, branches breaking, etc. So, in this film, the use of external diegetic and diegetic sound is extremely important, and a perfect example of how diegetic and external diegetic sounds can work together to enhance and expand the world being created. On the contrary, non-diegetic sound is any sound that is unnatural to the world being shown, but still necessarily fitting. So basically, non-diegetic sound would include anything from the music or the backtrack to a narration of a scene. All of these make the story understandable and sensible, but they're not necessarily fitting within the world of the scene. SFX are effects that are usually made digitally to mimic unnatural or sometimes natural sounds, or to enhance natural sounds. Foley sounds, on the other hand, are studio-created sound that's usually pretty natural. So, a studio sound is created in a sound studio, which is a larger room that uses practical or physical objects to achieve the desired sound. Finally, the score of a film is the music that lies underneath scenes. Most films have this, and it's usually best when you don't notice the score because it will just flow naturally within the scene. Alright, as previously mentioned before, I'm mostly going to be focusing on Steven Spielberg's 1993 adventure film Jurassic Park and Mary Harron's 2000 criminal drama American Psycho.
Pleasures of conformity and the importance of trends. It's also a personal statement about the band itself. Hey, Paul!
So first off, in Harron's American Psycho, we follow Patrick Bateman, who's a sociopathic and psychotic banking executive, as he starts to drown into his own delusions and violent impulses. So the film relies really heavily on narration from Bateman, and the unreliable narration from him is a huge reason for the uneasiness of the film. In using mostly non-diegetic sounds and allowing the viewer to learn the story through the main character, we're instinctively drawn further into the film.
West 81st Street, on the 11th floor. My name is Patrick Bateman. I'm 27 years old. I believe in taking care of myself.
In this scene, for example, most of the story and uneasiness is drawn because of the fact that Bateman is telling us his story. So without the narration and the score, Bateman wouldn't be nearly as unreliable, which would kind of change the entire mood of the film and affect the way that we actually view Patrick Bateman, which could possibly make us think that he is sane and not as psychotic or confusing as he's portrayed in the film.
And you can shake my hand and feel flesh gripping yours, and maybe you can even sense our lifestyles are probably comparable. I simply am not there.
Alternately, Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park uses zero narration and very little fourth wall breaking audio techniques to tell the story. Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park uses no narration and very little fourth wall breaking audio techniques to tell that story. So, unlike American Psycho, it's using a lot more of classical storytelling techniques and will have some score mixed in with it. The film follows a park that's attempting to bring dinosaurs back to life and is much more of a spectacle than a story. In this, I mean that the viewers, us, are wanting to experience the story happening instead of just being told what's happening, which American Psycho does very well. So, in Jurassic Park, diegetic sounds and external diegetic sounds, as well as SFX and Foley sounds, are integral to the story. So in the park, for example, whenever we hear birds in the distance, dinosaurs roaring, people in cars, etc., we're really getting an understanding of what this world truly is. Plays in super well later on in the movie when they're stuck in the kitchen and there's the dinosaurs in there, and also when the T-Rex attacks them outside of the cars. So by getting the viewer used to this constant external sound and constant stimulation of this world, Spielberg is also able to then twist it on its tail and scare us. In certain scenes towards the end, like the dinosaur scene that you guys just watched, and also the kitchen scene,
the tension is much higher and the external diegetic sounds kind of die out. So by this I'm meaning that Spielberg has set us up in this world that is very loud, there's a lot going on, it's very vast, open, it's controlled. So there's a lot of mechanics and that kind of stuff in the rest of the movie. But the second that tension gets higher, Spielberg twists that around and everything's quiet. All you hear is what the characters are hearing, and it brings a lot of more suspense into the scene than would necessarily happen if you didn't have any setup with the sound. This is also a really good example of sound in film in general, because it's always really good to not necessarily notice the sound or the sound effects being used in a film, and that kind of just means that it's going to flow together much better. So by doing that, the scenes after the power in the park is cut are way scarier and way more dramatic. So we don't necessarily have the comforting environmental sounds that we had at the beginning of the movie, and we're instead only hearing breathing, up-close dinosaurs, and then just stark silence at some points. This turn makes the film way more interesting to watch, and the sound design allows viewers to, even if it's subconscious, better get in tune with the suspense that's occurring on the screen and better connect with the characters on the screen. So while both films mix non-diegetic and diegetic sounds with SFX and Foley, the way that they use the types of sounds varies a lot. So even though each utilizes the techniques in sometimes the same ways, the overall toning and the way that they are using the techniques dramatically is changing the mood of each film. These scenes are a really great example of how you can mix and match diegetic and non-diegetic sounds to better fit the mood of the story you're telling, and they also both give really great, stark, different examples of how much sound can truly affect the story that you are trying to tell.